As we settle down for a restful night, close your eyes and imagine the kingdom of Oran, where winter winds howl and snow blankets the land. In a lonely tower, Prince Alaric gazes at the desolate horizon, weighed down by a prophecy that foretells his ruin. But tonight, this tale is one of courage and redemption. Join Alaric on his journey to find the mythical frozen phoenix, a creature that holds the power to reshape his destiny. Let the magic of his adventure wrap around you, guiding you gently into dreams filled with hope and warmth, reminding you that even in the darkest moments, light can be found. Sleep well, dear listeners, and let your imagination take flight. The winter winds howled across the snow-laden peaks of the kingdom of Oran, a land lost beneath the layers of frost, where each year the cold bit deeper and the sun lingered less. Prince Alaric stood alone in the castle's northern tower, staring out across the barren horizon as an unsettling weight bore down on his heart. Outside, the winter storm raged like a beast deprived of rest, shaking the stones of the ancient castle as if seeking entry to the heart of the kingdom itself. From birth, he had known the weight of prophecy, the words spoken in hushed tones, the sidelong glances, the looks of pity and apprehension from those who dared not meet his eyes. For it was foretold that he, Prince Alaric, would bring ruin to Oran, a destruction as unyielding and cold as the winter that never truly left. A dark fate awaited him unless he found a way to escape the prophecy's snare before the coming solstice. Yet for all his training and for all his wisdom, he knew not how to evade a fate woven into the very fabric of his life. It was the kingdom's oldest sage who finally whispered of the solution. Beneath the flickering glow of candlelight, his voice barely more than a sigh, the old man spoke of a creature older than any curse. Far to the north, past the glacial crags, he murmured, lies a being bound in frost, a creature of fire and rebirth, the frozen phoenix. It is said that the phoenix, a creature of pure flame trapped in ice, can rewrite the destinies of those who seek it with a heart desperate enough. But beware, young prince. Such bargains are not without their cost. The prince's heart quickened, though the sage's warning echoed in his mind. The phoenix was more myth than reality, spoken of in half-forgotten tales and bard songs. Yet the ancient creature called to him, a promise of freedom from the doom shadowing his life. And so, as the first snows of winter began to fall, Alaric prepared himself for the journey to the glacial crags, where even daylight feared to enter, and snow lay so deep it whispered secrets from the past. The next morning, before the first light, he set forth alone, his cloak wrapped tightly around him, his sword at his side, and his mind clouded with questions he dared not answer. Snow clung to him like a second skin, chilling him to the bone as he trudged through the dense, whispering woods. Each step took him farther from the familiar, deeper into a world where the trees bent low and silent, their branches heavy with frost, like fingers pointing the way to his fate. The journey grew harder with each passing day. Beneath the relentless winds, he could feel his strength waning, his breath a thin vapor in the endless cold. The nights stretched longer, colder, and in those empty hours, he was haunted by visions, phantoms of his future he could not quite recall, whispers of shadows cast by the prophecy he sought to outrun. Was it madness that drove him to trust in a legend? Or perhaps something darker that waited for him beyond the horizon? Finally, after days upon days of relentless travel, he reached the foot of the glacial crags, where the landscape rose in sharp, jagged peaks, stark against the sky. The air grew colder still, sharp as a blade, as if some unseen presence warned him away. But Prince Alaric pressed forward, his steps dogged, each one a refusal to yield to the fear gnawing at his heart. As he climbed the treacherous cliffs, he felt the power of the place seep into his bones. The mountains, gleaming with crystalline frost, seemed alive, watching, waiting. Then, through the gathering mist, he saw it, a cavern mouth, black and silent as an open grave. It was hidden behind thick blue ice, frosted over as though the very breath of winter sealed it from the world. A strange warmth tugged at his senses, a pulse of energy that cut through the chill and stirred something within him. This was the place of the phoenix. He felt it as clearly as he felt his own heartbeat. Slowly, as if drawn by an unseen force, he entered the cavern, his breath curling in soft clouds that vanished as he moved deeper, step by step, into the shadows. The further he went, the colder the air became, until it was a biting chill that seemed to reach past flesh and bone, straight into his heart. And there, at the cavern's center, he saw it, the phoenix. Encased in ice, a bird of impossible beauty lay trapped, its feathers flickering with the dim glow of embers beneath a thick, frozen layer. The ice shimmered, catching stray beams of light and casting eerie reflections across the cavern walls, painting them with glints of red and gold, like a hidden sun extinguished too soon. The phoenix's eyes, twin flames within the frost, met his, fierce and unblinking, as though it had been waiting, biding its time for centuries. Its fiery gaze held neither welcome nor warmth, only the promise of fate and the weight of ages. A voice, as ancient as the mountains, slipped into Alaric's mind, wrapping around him like a whisper in the dark. "So you have come, Prince Alaric," it murmured, a voice both resigned and knowing. "The chains of destiny bind us both. Shall we see if you are worthy of unbinding them?" And in that moment, as he gazed into the phoenix's burning eyes, Alaric knew that whatever awaited him beyond this encounter, he could not turn back. The cavern hummed with a low, thrumming energy, as if the very stones themselves held their breath, waiting for what might unfold. Prince Alaric could feel the phoenix's gaze upon him, a fierce, unrelenting fire that both warmed and chilled him to the marrow. Encased in layers of ancient ice, the phoenix seemed more spirit than flesh, a creature of flame and eternity, bound by forces beyond mortal understanding. "Who chained you here?" Alaric found himself whispering, though he knew not why he dared to speak to a creature older than his kingdom. The cavern absorbed his words, giving them weight and resonance, like drops falling into still water. The phoenix did not answer, not in any manner he could hear. Instead, the fire in its eyes blazed brighter, casting an otherworldly glow across the cavern. Alaric's shadow stretched long and strange upon the frozen walls, flickering like the ghost of a man who had never been. The phoenix's voice drifted through his mind once more, resonant and distant, a voice that held the memory of flames consuming worlds, of stars born and extinguished. "I was bound," it said slowly, "by those who feared the light I carried. For fire is both life and death, both creation and ruin. They feared the truths I would reveal, the secrets I held in my wings. And so, they chained me here, buried in this prison of ice, where my fire could neither flourish nor fade." The tale sent a chill through Alaric that had nothing to do with the cold. There was a familiarity in the phoenix's words, a resonance that struck close to his heart. Was he not bound too by the prophecy, chained by the fears and suspicions of those who feared his future? He felt an unexpected kinship with this being, their fates entwined by forces unseen. "Yet you seek freedom," the phoenix continued, its gaze sharpening. "Freedom from the destiny that hangs over you like a shadow, a fate you do not wish to claim. I offer you a bargain, Prince Alaric. If you break the chains that bind me, I will grant you the chance to escape your doom." Hope flared within Alaric's chest, bright and dangerous. But the phoenix's gaze grew darker, like embers smouldering beneath ash, and he felt the weight of its next words before they were even spoken. "But know this," it murmured, each word resonating like a tolling bell. "For every chain you shatter, a piece of your past will be unraveled, cast into the void beyond memory's reach. The life you have lived, the lessons you have learned, will slip from your mind, leaving you with nothing but fragments. Only in sacrifice can freedom be found." Alaric's heart faltered. To lose parts of himself, to forget his past. Could he pay such a price? Memories flooded his mind. The warm glow of his mother's smile, the sound of his father's laugh, the friendships, the love, the countless lessons that shaped him. Each memory felt like a tether, binding him to who he was, grounding him in the face of an uncertain future. And yet, the prophecy loomed, a dark promise waiting to claim his soul if he failed to act. The phoenix watched him, its eyes unyielding, as if it could see the struggle warring within him. Alaric knew then that this was not a creature that granted favours freely. Its power was boundless, but its mercy was scarce. And in that moment, he understood that his path was clear. To claim a future, he would have to surrender pieces of the man he had been. With a breath that shuddered in the frigid air, Alaric drew his sword, its steel flashing cold and bright, reflecting the fire buried in the phoenix's feathers. He turned to the first chain, a thick, jagged link that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light, cold as the cavern itself. The phoenix's eyes followed his movements, silent, waiting. His sword struck the chain, a blow that rang out like thunder. The chain shattered, scattering icy shards that vanished into the air. As the sound faded, a wave of disorientation swept over him, and he felt something slip from his mind. A memory, a sensation, like trying to grasp water in his hands. He could not recall what he had lost, but an emptiness lingered, a hollow space where something precious had once been. One chain down, Alaric steadied himself, though his heart beat faster, each beat echoing the phoenix's watchful gaze. He turned to the second chain, lifted his sword, and struck once more. Again, the metal shattered, but with it went another memory, a piece of his childhood. The feel of his father's guiding hand on his shoulder. A voice offering words of wisdom he could no longer recall. He staggered, bracing himself against the icy floor, his breath escaping in ragged gasps as the weight of his sacrifice settled upon him. Yet, as the chains fell, the phoenix's form grew brighter, its flames flickering beneath the ice with increasing fervor, as though tasting the freedom that lay so close. Alaric moved to the third chain, his movement slower now, more deliberate, each step heavier than the last. Each chain shattered took more of him, pieces slipping away into the cavern's cold, unforgiving silence. By the time he reached the final link, he felt as though he was standing on the edge of a vast, nameless void, his identity fragmented, drifting on the edge of oblivion. Yet still he lifted his sword, striking the last chain with a cry that echoed through the cavern, raw and desperate. The ice shattered in a final blinding blaze, and the phoenix was free. It rose from its prison, a creature of blazing fire, wings unfurling in a shower of sparks, its cry filling the air with the sound of ages past, of forgotten worlds and endless skies. Prince Alaric fell to his knees, his vision blurred, his mind a haze of memories half remembered and fragments slipping beyond his grasp. The phoenix hovered before him, flames casting a warm, almost tender light upon him. "You have freed me," it murmured, its voice now softer, filled with a solemn promise. "And now, Prince Alaric, to reclaim your destiny, there is one final trial that awaits." And though he had given all he knew, all he could remember, The phoenix's voice seemed to carry him forward, pulling him toward the mystery that lay within his own fractured heart. Prince Alaric knelt in the cavern, feeling hollow, as though the essence of who he was had been scooped out and scattered into the shadows. Flickers of memory remained, loose fragments that felt like whispers of a life barely lived, fleeting, slipping through his fingers. Yet even in his fractured state, he could sense a strange lightness within him, an unexpected clarity that came from his emptiness, like the quiet after a storm. The phoenix circled above him, its newly freed wings casting radiant embers across the cavern walls. The creature was magnificent, an ethereal blaze of red and gold, its feathers pulsing like molten fire, alive with ancient magic. As it soared, it seemed to reshape the very air, bending light and shadow to its will. Its voice, now a low murmur of smouldering flames, spoke within Alaric's mind. "You have broken my chains and surrendered parts of yourself to the void," the phoenix intoned. "But to rewrite your destiny, you must face a trial that lies beyond memory, beyond fear, a trial of flames that will strip away the shadows you yet carry. Only then will you emerge anew." Alaric rose on unsteady feet, his vision blurred by exhaustion and the strange weightlessness of his mind. He looked up at the phoenix, his gaze meeting the ancient eyes that burned with secrets of fire and transformation. Despite the light radiating from the phoenix, he could feel an icy terror creeping into his heart, a primal fear of the unknown trial he was to face. "Am I not worthy yet?" Alaric managed to whisper, his voice carrying a tremor. "Have I not given enough?" The phoenix's gaze softened, but its words remained unyielding. "You have given much, Prince Alaric, but there remains darkness within you, a burden not born of the past, but of the heart. It is this darkness that shapes your future, that gives rise to the prophecy you dread. To alter your fate, you must face the truth that lies within." Alaric's heart shuddered, his soul flickering like a candle against the oncoming storm. Yet he nodded, a quiet resolve rising within him, an acceptance of whatever lay ahead. The phoenix's flames flared once more, encircling him in a fiery halo, and the world around him shifted, blurred, as though he were slipping into a dream. When his vision cleared, Alaric found himself standing in a boundless expanse, a landscape of pure flame. A shimmering field of fire stretched endlessly, a place without sky or earth, where every direction seemed at once near and far. The heat was oppressive, and yet it did not burn his skin. It was an internal heat, a warmth that grew within him, revealing parts of himself he had kept hidden, even from himself. As he took a step forward, shapes began to rise from the flames, coalescing into forms he recognized. Visions from his own life, vivid and haunting. There before him stood the child he had been, a young prince filled with wonder and arrogance, driven by pride and reckless ambition. The boy stared back at him with eyes wide and bright, unknowing of the dark future that lay ahead. "You sought power for yourself, didn't you?" the vision of his younger self asked, its voice sharp and accusing. "You thought yourself invincible. You never cared for the kingdom, for your people. You only cared for the glory, for the throne." Alaric's heart clenched, the weight of the accusation burning within him, yet he could not deny it. In his youth he had yearned for power, for the admiration of his people and the respect of his peers. He had thought of himself as a savior, destined to bring greatness to the kingdom. Yet his ambition had been selfish, blind to the needs of those around him. As he struggled to face the truth, the flames around him intensified, and another figure emerged from the fire, a vision of his father, his gaze stern and sorrowful. His father's voice rang out, clear as a bell, the weight of disappointment palpable. "You abandoned the kingdom, Alaric. When you could have brought peace, you chose conflict. When you could have brought wisdom, you chose pride. You have not only betrayed yourself, but those who loved you most." The words struck him like blows, each one leaving a hollow ache within him. Memories flashed before his eyes, moments of selfishness, of pride, of arrogance that had wounded those closest to him, had pushed away the people who believed in him. The prophecy, he realized, was not a curse laid upon him by some outside force. It was born from his own actions, his own choices. The flames rose higher, enveloping him in a blazing inferno, and he felt as though he were dissolving, his spirit stripped bare, exposed to the raw, merciless fire of truth. He knelt, his heart heavy, consumed by the weight of his own regrets, the burden of his own failures. But as he surrendered to the flames, something unexpected happened. The fire did not destroy him. It purified him. The flames seared away the bitterness, the pride, the arrogance that had clouded his heart. In their place, a new strength blossomed, a quiet humility, a resolve born not of ambition, but of understanding. The phoenix appeared before him, its eyes no longer fierce, but filled with an approving warmth. "You have faced yourself, Prince Alaric," it murmured, its voice like the crackling of embers. "You have seen the shadows within, and let the flames cleanse you. Now, you are ready." Alaric rose to his feet, feeling lighter, his heart steadier, his spirit tempered by fire. He knew that he was changed, that the man who had entered the cavern was no more. The prophecy no longer held power over him, for he understood now that his fate was his own to shape. The phoenix's wings flared once more, sending a cascade of fiery light across the landscape. "Then go, Alaric," it whispered, a gentle yet powerful command. "Return to your kingdom, not as the prince burdened by fate, but as a man who has reclaimed his soul. For you the path is clear, a new destiny awaits." And as the flames faded, Alaric felt the weight of a world both old and new settle upon him, a warmth that guided him back through the cavern toward the dawn that awaited beyond the ice. The cavern's cold returned to Prince Alaric in waves as the phoenix's flames receded, leaving behind a silence as vast as the winter night. He stumbled forward, feeling the lingering warmth of the fire within him, yet outside, the air was like a sheath of ice. The trial had left him weakened, stripped down to something raw and vulnerable. And though the memories that had once been his lay scattered in some unreachable corner of his mind, he sensed a new clarity within him, a vision cleared of shadows. As he exited the cavern, dawn crept over the horizon, a pale, gentle light casting hues of gold over the snowy landscape. The world outside felt different, sharper and more vivid, as if the phoenix's flames had ignited something in his sight, something beyond the ordinary. Yet even in this renewed world, fragments of memory lingered, half-formed images flickering at the edges of his mind, shadows of a past he could almost remember but could not quite hold. As he moved through the snow, the memories surfaced like echoes, broken pieces of himself rising to be seen once more. The first image was of a woman's face, his mother, radiant and kind, her eyes filled with love and sadness, a look he could only half remember, a gaze that tugged at his heart like an old wound. He recalled a moment years ago, standing by her side in the grand hall of his castle as she had spoken to him, her voice soft yet heavy with meaning. "Remember, Alaric," she had whispered. "True power lies not in ruling, but in understanding those you rule. Let your heart be as open as your hand, and you will be a king worthy of Auron." The memory slipped away, leaving a bittersweet ache in his chest. And Alaric wondered how he had forgotten such words. How could he have strayed so far from that wisdom, so blind to the warmth she had tried to kindle in his heart? As he continued to walk, other memories emerged, ghostly apparitions flickering in his vision. His father's fierce pride tempered by wisdom, his friends and allies who had once laughed and fought by his side. But each memory was a reminder of moments lost, friendships abandoned, decisions made in arrogance and haste. He saw now that his path had been tangled with mistakes, each misstep leading him deeper into darkness, until he had become bound by the prophecy that sought to claim him. In his mind, he could still hear the phoenix's words echoing like the last embers of a fire refusing to die. "It is the shadows in your own heart that bind you, Alaric. The prophecy is a mirror, a reflection of the path you carved by your own hand." The truth settled over him, harsh and cold. He had been his own captor, his own curse, a prisoner of his pride and ambition. The Phoenix's trial had not only freed him from the chains of destiny, but from the chains of his own making, the burdens of a past he had never truly understood until now. It had taken the fires of rebirth to reveal what lay beneath his arrogance, to strip away the pretense and show him the man he had been. As he walked on, cresting the hill that led to his kingdom's borders, he saw the world anew. The kingdom lay stretched before him, a realm of ice and stone. But beneath the frost, he saw glimmers of life, the dark green of evergreen trees, the soft glow of village fires sparking awake in the early morning. He could almost hear the distant hum of voices, of lives going on despite the winter's harshness, despite the threat of the prophecy. He realized now that he had been distant, disconnected, blind to the resilience of the people he was destined to lead. Suddenly, as if summoned by his thoughts, a memory rose unbidden, sharp and clear as the morning air. The sight of a small child on the streets of the kingdom. A child he had seen years ago, shivering in the winter cold, her small hands reaching out as he had passed her by. He had ignored her then, barely a glance spared as he moved through the city, absorbed in his own world of royal affairs, plans, and visions of grandeur. Now the image struck him with a force like ice breaking. The memory was no longer a faded vision. It was a reminder of his neglect, his blindness to the very people who looked to him for hope. In that moment, Alaric felt a stirring within him, a desire not to rule, but to serve, to be more than the cold figure of a prince locked away in a castle of stone. He knew now that his kingdom needed a leader who could see them, who could understand their needs, who would walk among them as one of their own. The prophecy had been nothing more than a warning, a mirror held up to show him the flaws he could choose to amend. The Phoenix had granted him more than the chance to change his destiny. It had granted him the vision to understand what it meant to be a true king. As the dawn's light touched the horizon, he felt a new warmth blossom within him, a promise of the man he was yet to become. With renewed purpose, Alaric took his first steps back toward Auron, his heart clear, his past unveiled, his future unwritten yet filled with the promise of redemption. He walked on, the light of dawn stretching before him, guiding him home. The winter sun rose higher as Prince Alaric descended from the mountains, its pale light casting shadows across the snow-covered kingdom below. Each step brought him closer to Auron, yet he felt as though he were walking through a dream, a world both familiar and strange. The burden of the prophecy, the weight he had once carried like an iron yoke, was gone. In its place was a sense of calm purpose, a clarity that stemmed not from certainty, but from acceptance. He was no longer bound by fate. He was free to shape his future as he willed. The journey to the kingdom's edge was longer than he remembered, yet he relished each step, each breath of icy air, as if the very act of returning was part of his transformation. He walked until he reached the outer village, a cluster of cottages nestled against the kingdom's borders. their chimneys releasing thin tendrils of smoke into the crisp morning. He watched as villagers moved through the morning light, cloaked in heavy furs, their faces etched with the quiet endurance that had defined the people of Oran for centuries. As he entered the village, heads turned, eyes widened and murmurs spread. They knew him, the prince, the one of whom they had whispered, the one cursed to bring ruin. He felt the weight of their stares, yet for the first time, he did not shy away. Alaric's gaze was open, steady, meeting each pair of eyes with a quiet, newfound humility. Among the villagers, an old man approached, his face creased with age and the harshness of many winters. "Prince Alaric," he said, his voice rough but respectful. "We did not expect you to return, not alone." "I have returned to serve," Alaric replied, his voice soft but unwavering. "To mend what I have neglected and to learn from the people I once ignored. I am here not as a prince bound by prophecy, but as a man who wishes to understand, to earn your trust, to be worthy of the land we share." The old man's gaze softened, a flicker of surprise in his weathered eyes, and he gave a slow nod. Words spread through the village like the crackling of a fire in the dark, whispers filled with wonder, suspicion, and a cautious hope. Alaric could feel their uncertainty, their guardedness, and he welcomed it. Redemption was not a gift to be handed out, but a path to be earned, one step at a time. He spent days in the village, living among the people, working alongside them, feeling the rhythms of their daily lives, the chill of morning chores, the warmth of fireside gatherings, the laughter of children chasing each other through snowdrifts. For the first time, he saw them not as subjects, but as people with stories and dreams, fears and hopes that mirrored his own. The days turned into weeks, and in that time, Alaric learned the language of the land, the way each snowflake settled on the earth, how each winter breeze carried whispers of life beneath the frost. He felt his heart open, his soul grow, nourished by the bonds he formed, the faces he came to know as friends rather than mere subjects. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft, dusky glow, Alaric was summoned to the castle. Word had spread of his transformation, of the prince who had returned without his former arrogance, the prince who worked beside the people, whose heart had changed. The court awaited him in silence as he entered, a hall filled with lords, advisors, and noble families, all watching with apprehension and curiosity. His parents, the king and queen, stood at the far end of the hall, their faces unreadable, a quiet intensity in their eyes. His father stepped forward, his expression softened with age, a glimmer of pride mixed with an unspoken question. "Alaric," he said, his voice echoing through the silent hall, "we have heard of your journey, of the man you have become. But tell us, what has truly changed in you?" Alaric took a breath, meeting his father's gaze, and spoke not as a prince, but as a son and as a man reborn. I have seen the darkness within myself, Father, and I have felt the fire that can consume or create. The prophecy was never a curse, but a warning, a mirror of the flaws that blinded me. I was arrogant, unworthy of the crown. But I have learned that true power lies not in control, but in compassion, not in pride, but in humility. I am here not to rule, but to serve, to rebuild the trust I broke. The hall was silent, each face turned toward him, a reflection of his own journey in their eyes. Then his mother stepped forward, a smile touched with sadness but filled with pride. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes misted with tears. "My son," she said softly, "you have become the man we always hoped you would be." In that moment, Alaric felt a weight lift, the final chain of his old self falling away. He was no longer bound by fear or pride. He was a man shaped by fire and humility, a man who had embraced his flaws and emerged stronger. The kingdom celebrated for days, a long-awaited thaw sweeping over the land as if in answer to Alaric's transformation. The once endless winter broke, rivers of ice melting into streams of life, trees budding with the first hints of spring. The people gathered laughing and singing as they welcomed not just a prince, but a king who knew them, who had walked among them and understood their trials and joys. In the years that followed, Alaric ruled with a wisdom and compassion that became legend. The frozen phoenix was spoken of in hushed reverence, a tale of fire and ice, of chains broken and destinies rewritten. Alaric's reign was remembered not for its grandeur, but for its kindness, for the warmth he brought to a kingdom once locked in winter. And though he ruled well every so often, he would look toward the northern mountains, feeling a quiet presence, a whisper of flames that reminded him of the journey that had brought him here. In his heart, he knew that the phoenix's fire burned still, guiding him, a light in the depths of winter. Thus, Prince Alaric became the king who freed his kingdom not through power, but through love, a legacy forged in fire, a destiny rewritten. And the people of Oran thrived, their hearts warm as the snows melted, their spirits lifted, their lives forever touched by the prince who had ventured into the ice, faced his darkest self, and emerged like the phoenix reborn.